Hi everyone, this is Trisha, and I'm back again today with another watercolor video for you. Today I decided to mix it up and do a watercolor tag money holder for you. I saw this tag holder on Pinterest and I thought it was a great idea, and it's so easy. I thought I would do a video and show you how I did it. So first I'm taking my watercolor paper and I'm taking a number 8 tag die from Holtz, and I'm just marking it out with a pencil. You could use this die, or you can use the Ink Essentials number 8 manila tags that come already pre-cut. I didn't do that because I wanted to watercolor, so I wanted to cut it out of my watercolor paper. So now I'm taking my ruler and I'm just going to mark 2 inches from the top, and then I'm going to put it on that bottom line and I'm going to mark 1.5 inches. Those are where my score lines are going to be, and I want to make sure my focal image stays between those lines. So let's move on to the watercoloring portion. I'm going to show you how I created this watercoloring tag. So I'm using the little cottage you see here, the birch trees from the covered bridge set. I thought I might use that little bench. I didn't end up using it. And I'm actually going to be using the little top of the fir trees from the Fir Trees Set. I added that in later. So right now I'm going to use a stamp positioner because I really want to make sure that things are exactly where I want them and that they're lined up perfectly. So I'm going to use 2 colors on this little cottage because it's going to be in the snow. I know you're shocked, but it is still snow out. So I'm going to ink it up with the sepia, and I'm also going to ink it up with the African violet on the top. And I'm avoiding those lines on the roof because I want this to look like a snowy roof. So I'm not going to ink up those lines on the roof itself. I want to make sure I get both those little roofs on the left hand side as well. Then I'm going to take my sepia and I'm going to ink up the rest of the stamp. This is so I can pull the sepia into the house, and I can use the African violet on the roof itself. We've done this technique a few times now, so it should be old hat for you. Make sure you get that little chimney in there as well. Just ink up these little windows. As you'll notice as we get on this video, I'm going to speed up certain portions of it, the coloring and stuff, because you don't need to watch me get all obsessive about coloring. You can do as much and as little coloring as you want using your palette. I tend to get a little bit more detailed, and that's just my style, but these videos would be a lot longer if I didn't speed things up, and you can really do these little projects a lot quicker, but I tend to get a little overly obsessive, and I like to watercolor, so for it to take me a little longer, it doesn't bother me. So I'm using my stamp positioner right now to put that cottage exactly where I want it. And then I'm just going to go in and I'm going to ink it up again. And I'm going to stamp it right there, almost in the center of my tag. I've cut out a mask using a Post-it note. And I'm going to put that right over my little cottage. And I'm going to take my birch trees and I'm going to ink them up with sepia. And I'm going to actually stamp that onto the positioner again. So I want to make sure these are going to be exactly where I want them to be. Now you notice I'm not inking up the entire stamp, just the tree part at the bottom. Put my positioner together, stamp that in the corner, and then I'm going to move that right behind this little cottage, exactly where I want it. Now I'm not really caring that I'm outside of my line. That's fine. It's not going to matter as long as you can see some of the trees behind the house. So I'm not really concerned about it going off the edge. So I'm going to ink this again with my sepia. Then I'm going to come in with some African violet, and I'm just going to hit a couple of different areas because I want a little variation when I go to watercolor this. I want it to have a little bit of the sepia, a little bit of the African violet, and a little bit of a mix of the two. because I think it gives a really cool effect. So now I'm going to make sure I line that up again, exactly where I want it. I'm going to place my little T there, and then I'm going to stamp that right in the corner of that positioner, right behind the house. Now before I take the mask off, I'm actually going to stamp this again because I want those trees to be on both sides of the house. I'm just trying to decide, I'm going to move it down a little bit more so they're not exactly in the same line. And then I'm going to huff on that stamp, and then I'm going to stamp it down next to it. Huffing just reactivates, it's the moisture in your breath. When you huff on your stamp, it just helps to reactivate the ink so that you can stamp it again and still get a really good impression. If you didn't do that, it would be really light. So I've zoomed in a little bit here, and I'm putting some African Violet and some Sepia on my palette. And now I'm speeding this video up because I want to show you, and I got really in close because I really wanted to show you the watercoloring portion. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep those birch trees white. So I don't want to do what we normally do, which is pull the color into the image. I'm pulling the color on the outside of the image in the negative space to create the illusion that there's a sky behind these trees, which then makes these trees really pop out as white, which is what birch trees are. They're white. So I'm pulling it up and into the clouds as well. This is going to be a cloudy scene. It's going to have some different colors in the top. It's going to look kind of snowy. So I'm using a little bit more water than I would normally, and I'm just going to pull that color up and out and into the top of this tag, because I really want to fill the whole tag in too, because this is going to be part of the project. I want the whole tag to be full. So you'll notice that I'm pulling not only the color out of here, but I'm adding color as I go too from my palette. I'm using a number 8 silver brush, which seems kind of big, but I really like it. It holds a lot of water, a lot of pigment, and it gives me a really good point so to do all those small areas. And I don't have to switch brushes when I go to do the sky and try to get some really good movement in the sky as well. So I'm just going to continue to pull color out of these lines and into the sky here. And I get a little crazy, like stop doing my trees and then I go into the sky, but that's how I roll. I switch around. Sometimes I have a little touch of ADD. And I like the look of the hard edges in the sky. So when I have a couple different colors, I like to just mush them all in there and then let it dry, so that way it just gives a really nice depth and a really nice effect. And so if you take sepia and African Violet and you mix them, you get this really cool gray color, which is what you're going to see here, that I just really love when you mix those two colors together. That's a trick I learned from Bonnie Krebs, and I just love it. I love that color. I think it just is so dynamic, and you could lay down a gray or a black, but it just doesn't give the dynamic color that if you mix two colors that you get, especially sepia because it has so many different colors in it. It's just one of my favorite color combinations. So now I'm just pulling the rest of the color. I'm trying to make the top of those trees kind of fade into that background, into the sky up the top, because I want it to look like the clouds are kind of covering the tops of those trees. And then I'm just adding different colors. Now I decided I was going to zoom out so that you could see me kind of coloring in the sky portion here. So I'm continuing to add color from my palette onto those, behind those birch trees and into the sky here. I just love the depth that that gives when you let things dry and then you come in with more color. It just, those hard edges are really awesome. And then if you take a paper towel, you can get rid of some of that color and it just gives another nice effect. I'm really trying to get those birch trees to fade into the sky. So now I'm just taking the color out of that roof and trying to create a snowy roof effect, which you'll see here I used a little too much water and pulled my color right into the roof, but I don't really think it matters. I'm going to continue to color around that, so I think it'll end up being fine. You'll end up seeing it just goes right into the rest of the house the way I colored it. I don't get too caught up in mistakes like that. I figure I can always fix them. Nothing is unfixable. So now I'm taking where the darkest parts would be under those roof lines, around the windows. I want that little part on the right hand side to be really, really dark, and I'm going to make this part really dark as well. I want that one that's in the front to be the lightest. And I want to try to give this a worn barn type of a look, like it's been in the woods and it's real weather beaten. We snowmobile in Vermont and we pass a lot of some cottages that are dilapidated, some are not, but a lot of them look really weathered. So it gives me they give me great ideas on things I want to watercolor, because they have a lot of character, I think, those little cottages. So now I'm just bringing some of the African violet onto that little roof there. Kind of got lost, and then into the background again. I'm just going to go around those windows and pull that color out. I'm going to leave those windows white because what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some African violet and create some window panes. So now a little bit more sepia from my palette. I'm trying to mix it in with that African violet just to get some really dark shadows. And then I'm going to do that mixture of sepia and African violet to get that gray color. And then I'm really just pulling it down in straight lines because I want them to look like boards. I really want you to see the lines. I don't want them to just mold into each other. Because like I said, I want this to kind of look like a weather-beaten wood cottage in the woods. And a lot of those cottages, if you look at them, they have like darker coming from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to try to create that type of an illusion. I'm just adding a little more of the sepia to the top of this cottage. I love this Rustic Cottages. It's such a great set, especially if you want to do some masculine cards, which are always a challenge for me. What to do for a masculine card, and this set just, I have so many projects that I could do with it. It's amazing. And I thought this was a great card holder, great money holder if you want to give someone cash instead of if you need a present to give them, and if you're like my son, he'd just as soon you give him cash, which I hate to do, but sometimes if that's what they want, that's what they want. So I try to do something that will spice it up when I put the cash inside of it. Makes me feel better. He probably doesn't care, but anyhow. As you see, I'm pulling those colors up from the bottom, and I'm using that African violet and sepia mixture, and just trying to create that illusion of the darker wood at the bottom coming up to that lighter wood at the top. I think I did a pretty good job there. So I'm adding some more of that African violet to the door. And then I'm going to start pulling out, I'm going to put the African violet on my palette again. And I want to start creating the illusion of snow. So I laid down, I'm pulling out some of the color here. I'm laying it down and then I'm kind of pulling it out. And then I'm going in and softening it. And then just adding some highlights to the top, so that when I add the water, it's going to pull some of that color down into the top of the snow. I want to make most of it just remain white because snow is white, but I really want these really subtle highlights. So as you see, I'm putting some water down and then I'm softening it up quite a bit, just because I don't want some of these harsh lines in there. And then I'll use the water just to pull the lines out a little bit more. I really wanted this cottage to look like it was sitting in a big pile of snow. And if you feel like you got too much, like I just dried my brush off and I'm just pulling some of that color back, you can do that as well. Soften them and then add more color or take color away. Watercoloring is very, very forgiving in that area. So I'm putting a little more color on the door. Then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take some African violet and I'm going to make a point out of my brush, and then I'm going to just put some window panes in here. I'm not trying to be super careful. They don't have to be perfect. I just want the hint of some windows. So now I'm taking some Prussian blue and I wanted to add a little cold stream that just went right in front of this little house. So I'm just brushing in the idea of the stream, and I'm going to go outside of that box that I drew because when I cut this out it's not going to matter, so I don't care if the right hand side of that box is really messy. So now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to put some dark highlights right along the edges of that stream. Just some darker pigment there. And then I took a little bit of that purple or the African violet and just went along the top just to make the snow look like it's kind of sitting over it. And then I'll just put a little bit more color in there. So I'm going back in now that my sky is completely dry and I'm just enhancing it a little bit. And I wanted to put a little bit more snow in that foreground there. So a little bit of finishing touches here and there. And after I was almost done and I thought, well, I need a bit of color. So I took the top fir tree there that I use all the time. And I just wanted to make a few little pine trees in this little forest. I thought they would be really cute. I didn't want them to be too many because I really liked those other trees and how those came out. So I just wanted to put a few here and there in just to give this a little more color. So now I'll come in with my brush and I'll just soften those little pine trees up. They don't need a lot of water, just a very little. You don't want them to be colored in solid because that is not how you want to watercolor these stamps, as we know. I wanted to add a little bit more color to that chimney, which seemed to get a little lost for me. And then put my mask back over it so that I can stamp a few more of those evergreen trees behind this house. Then I'll just take my brush and pull a little bit of that color out. Okay, and once again I'm going to come in here. I was really into the sky apparently. So I just came in here and I wanted to add a few more shadows underneath those clouds just to create a really deep illusion of the sky, and then just finish off and pull some of that color into the snow in front of this cottage. So that's about it for the watercoloring. Now I'm going to show you how to create the gift card itself. We're going to be using my Big Shot machine, the tag dies, a bone folder, and the Scor-Buddy. So as you see here, I cut this out with the tag. Now I'm going to take my Scor-Buddy and I'm going to score the tag 2 inches from the top. And I do it a few times because it is watercolor paper. And then 1.5 inches from the bottom. Now you can fold it over, and then I take my bone folder and I just really crease those edges, just so I get a really good crease in there. Okay, and you see my image is perfectly centered in the front of this card. Clean my little workstation there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this up and I'm going to put some Scor-Tape. This is the 1/8 inch Scor-Tape on the edges, and I want to go as close to the edges as possible so that my money fits right in that center area. You can actually put it laying down or standing up. Either way, it works better if it's standing up, but you can put it in laying down as well. So I'm going to take off the release paper and I'm just going to fold that bottom edge right up and use my bone folder just to make sure it's nice and secure. So after I did this video, I couldn't figure out a nice way to close that flap. You could use, I'm going to show you here just how the money fits in here. You could use a ribbon and tie it around the whole thing, but I really didn't like that. I wanted it to close with some kind of a mechanism. So this morning I was dreaming about it and I came up with this little idea. So I'm going to show you, I actually videotaped this morning so I could show you exactly how I did it. So I created this little piece and adhered it to the back. I just used a piece of cardstock. And then I folded it over and made a slit in that bottom piece with a craft knife. I made it the same size, a little bit smaller than the top of that tag, so that this little piece of cardstock would fit nicely inside. And then to cover up the hole, I just had a little die cut heart. I colored with my marker and just placed it right on the top of that, right over the hole, so it makes a nice finishing touch. And that's it. That's the entire project. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I would love if you haven't already, if you would subscribe to my channel. And I've linked a couple more videos right here if you want to check out some other videos that I've done. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.